Shalom. Hello to all of our alumni and friends. It's once again a great pleasure for me to be able to share a few words of Torah with you. We really have in this week's Parsha one of my favorite Divrei Torah. So in just a few minutes, let me share with you what that is and what I think the applications are for our lives. The Torah, Parshat Tetzeh, this week begins with three very brief, very interesting halachas. Number one, the Torah says that the story of the Eshes Shifas Toar. If a man goes out to war and he sees a woman and he's unable to control himself, the Torah gives a special, dispensation for him to go ahead and essentially marry this woman. Eshes Shifas Toar, that's number one. Number two, the story, the halacha that's known as Echad Ahuva ve'Echad Hasnua, that if a man has two wives, one is the wife he loves, one he does not love as much, and the firstborn, his bechor, is to the woman who's hasnua, the one he doesn't love, he nevertheless is obligated to give the double portion that's awarded to the firstborn to that son, even though he comes from the wife that he doesn't love as much. And number three is the famous story of the Ben Sorer Morer, the son who's rebellious and ultimately is killed by Beis Din. Now we know the story never happened. The Gemara tells us, I believe in Sanhedrin, that the Ben Sorer Morer never actually occurred, but nevertheless, the halacha is on the books. So three halachas: Eshes Shifas Toar, Echad Ahuva ve'Echad Hasnua, and the Ben Sorer Umorer. And the obvious question is, what in the world is the connection between these three halachas? Why does the Torah put these three halachas together? Rashi, really interestingly, on the spot, tells us that in fact there's a progression. That if a man marries an Eshes Shifas Toar, eventually he's going to come to hate her, to despise her, Echad Ahuva ve'Echad Hasnua, and eventually they will have a son who will be a Ben Sorer Umorer. So what we have here is what amounts to essentially a punishment. If a man goes ahead and marries an Eshes Shifas Toar, a beautiful woman he finds in battle, then eventually he's going to be punished with the Ben Sorer Umorer. And the question is obvious. If the Torah allows the man to marry the Eshes Shifas Toar, how then can the Torah punish him for taking advantage of that dispensation, of that heter? Essentially, it's not really allowed then. It's allowed, but we punish you. But there are consequences to your action. How could that be? If he's allowed to do it, why does the Torah punish him for doing it? Rav Eliyahu Schlesinger, who is the Rav of the Yerushalayim town known as Gilo, gives a really beautiful answer. What he says is that the Ben Sorer Umorer is not a punishment for somebody who marries an Eshes Shifas Toar. It's a natural outcome. It's the consequence of that action. Not as a punishment, but as a natural occurrence, what will come about. If a child is raised in a home where the values that permeate from that home are such as a father is unable to control himself on the battlefield, needs to marry this beautiful woman, then unfortunately those values are going to be passed on to the child. And in likelihood, that child will then one day become a Ben Sorer Umorer. And that, says Rav Schlesinger, is the powerful lesson from these three sections being joined together in the Torah. To teach us, to remind us, something I think we all know, but to remind us that the environment in which we find ourselves has a disproportionately large impact on the people that we ultimately become. And that's a pretty powerful lesson. For further study, I don't know if we have time right now, but if somebody wants to look into it a little bit further, check out the end of last week's Parsha. Look at the last story in Parsha Shoftim and see if that story connects to this idea as well. But what about for us? Here we are in the Chodesh Elul, on the cusp of Rosh Hashanah, only in a couple weeks, and all of us are looking to improve, to see where we can get better, where we could become better people. And this message almost could be a little bit depressing. You mean I'm just a victim? I'm a product of my environment? I have no control, I have no choice? I'm just going to become what my environment dictates? It's a little bit depressing. So why would we read this story right before Rosh Hashanah? And I think the idea is that while on one hand, maybe it could be a little bit, you feel a victim, I think you have to take exactly the opposite approach. This is an incredibly empowering message. This is a tool on our tool belt in deciding what type of people we'd like to become. If we recognize and we're honest with ourselves and realize that to a large degree our environment does impact on the type of people we are, then let's take advantage of that knowledge. Let's find environments which will positively impact on us, such as a good chevra, a good school, what type of home do we want to create for ourselves and our families, and hopefully by using this tool, it'll help all of us to achieve our goals in Avodas Hashem as we approach the very special day of Rosh Hashanah. I want to wish all of you a great Shabbos. It's a pleasure to be with you again, and I look forward to more opportunities to learn together in the future. Take care.